Hi, I'm Vic Bearcroft, and today I'm going to show you how to paint an atmospheric portrait of this gorgeous snow leopard on a wintry background with just a few simple pastels. As always, began the painting with a soft charcoal outline, mostly concentrating on the markings, the spots of course, for our snow leopard. It's important just to concentrate on the features, the markings, don't worry about the outline as such. That'll build up with the tone and eventually some highlights. So the markings are key to spots and stripes, in this case spots of course. So what we need to do now is, once we've got everything in place, use the hard black pastel to reinforce those markings, get a little bit of fur texture in and so on. So remember, we don't want an outline all the way around it, that'll make it look too cartoony. We're going to build the outline up bit by other means. So let's start with the ear, and our snow leopard has black fur around the back of the ear, just peeping over the edge. This of course is a dark outline anyway, so when I talk about the other outlines, I mean the outline of the head and so on. When we have black fur around the edge of something, then of course we can put that in. And we'll loosely define the centre of the ear hole, dark shadow, and just mark it in. Don't press too hard at this stage with your hard black pastel. What you want to do is have a little bit of room to manoeuvre, so if it's not dark enough you can always add more, but as always, on the law, if you put it in too heavy to begin with, then it's a hard job trying to get it off. So mid pressure, I would say, light to mid hand pressure, depending on how heavy handed you are. So we're after a mid to dark grey underpainting, if you like. So let's move on to put in some of these markings fairly loosely again, and don't go for black, go for mid to dark grey. And where possible, not always possible, but where it is possible, try and look for the direction of the fur strokes. So always the fur in the head, from the forehead up, grows upwards. So we want sort of vertical, slightly angled strokes like this. And right from this early stage, that'll begin to give you some nice realistic fur texture, rather than just blocking it in. So we do the edge of the other ear while we're here. It's mostly that little corner section, like that. Now you can wait until you've done all this before you rub the pastel in, but I like to do it as I go along. So what this achieves, it pushes the pastel into the fibres of the paper, makes it stick, softens your mask a little bit, but also what it does is spread a little bit of tiny bits of pastel around those markings, just to start to add some nice soft tone as well. So don't think you're getting it dirty or anything like that, or you're making it messy. What you're doing is using every little bit of that pastel to create some tone as well. A good hard stroke with your finger like that. And of course you'll notice on the velour, if you've not used it before, that pastel isn't going anywhere. It sticks in the fibres, self-fixing if you like. And that's the beauty of it. It only gives you soft textures, allows you to build up lots and lots of layers, and it's virtually indestructible in terms of removing the pastel. It won't smudge. As long as you rub it in well, then that pastel isn't going anywhere. There we are. So let's work around methodically. I always find when it comes to spots and stripes, be methodical. So work from the top down, just don't go for that bit, then that bit, then that bit, then that bit. I usually find that markings, be it spots or be it stripes, are fairly symmetrical. So if you go from one side to the other as you work down, That helps you to keep those markings, especially stripes on a tiger, it helps to keep them symmetrical. And I prefer to call them markings rather than spots, by the way, because they're not all spots. Some have quite distinct shapes. And being a leopard, like all leopards, they have some rosettes, which we can't see because they're on the body. Whereas cheetahs will have spots. So notice again, even I'm putting these markings in fairly softly, not too sharp at this point. I'm still trying to replicate the direction and direction and thickness of the fur, because it's all fur. Even though they're spots or rosettes, stripes, or whatever they are, it's still fur, just darker fur. Okay, so we'll leave the eyes, come back to the eyes, just concentrate on the markings to begin with. And even if you haven't put them all in, just put the main markings in when you're doing your initial sketch. You can always add the smaller ones in between as you work through. You can locate them fairly easily. And with a hard pastel, like this hard black pastel, you don't need to over rub to push the pastel in. Just a good firm stroke with the end of the finger will do. That will be enough just to settle the pastel into the fibres, also to soften it and help to spread some of that tone around the area of the markings. So already we're getting some nice sort of light grey tones appearing automatically. So down to the nose, that's always worth remembering, around the nose and mouth. Specific little markings or spots that you may not have considered before. We've got a couple of scent glands up there at the top of the nose, then we've got the whisker follicles where the whiskers grow out of, and they're always 4 rows, no matter what the cat. So don't do 5, don't do 3, always 4. There's 1, and of course the curve, the apparent curve of these help to give you the curve of the cheeks. There's 2. And when we have leopards and tigers, they're quite obvious because they're usually fairly dark, almost black rows. 1, 2, 3, and the final one at the bottom. And 4. Okay? You can see a hint of those on the other side. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll do the nose before we move down, so let's put the nostril shape in first. The hardest part, in other words, the most solid part, not the most difficult, the solid part of the nostril is at the top there, and it fades out into the cheek underneath. So that's where you draw your line at the top part. Let it fade out underneath. Now there's a little sort of heart shape, cat's nose. All cat's noses have that little heart shape there. Nostril on the other side we can't see. They all come down to join the cleft between the cheeks. There's the cleft. And then we have our mouth. The curvature of the mouth is important. It goes along here. Now, normally on leopards and tigers you get a large black piece of fur that joins, almost visually joins the cheeks to the chin. It doesn't actually, but visually it does. So we've got a nice big black area underneath there, underneath the whiskers. The whiskers go on afterwards, of course. And then visually that joins them together. We've got a little sort of curve for the bottom lip. That's an upward curve. And bring that down into the jowl area. So there's that nice big black patch of fur. Little spots in the chin. And then you can can start to show the chin shape with the markings behind it. So I'm going to let this fade out a little bit underneath. There's the line of the neck. Again, we can begin to show the line of the neck with the markings around it. So that's all our markings in, pretty much. What we'll do next, just darken that a little bit. What we'll do next is the shape of the eye, just a basic shape of the eye at this point. We'll do the detail much later on. So, eye on the left, start with the lovely eyelashes there. And then we've got the pupil right up in the corner, slightly facing away from us. So just right in that corner there. The lower part of the eyeball and the lower rim. And then a hint of the cheek on the other side. Then we'll have this one. So again, upper eyelid, or the eyelash line, going down to the corner. And the eyeball itself, we can just see a little bit of the white of the eye in the right hand side, so we'll put that in. The pupil, again, don't worry about highlights, reflections, anything like that at this stage. The rounded pupils, the lower rim, and finally down to the tear duct in the corner. That's our basic shape. Now once we've got a basic shape, so we can elaborate on that a little bit, we can tidy it up a little bit more, but we need to make sure that shape is there. So drop the upper eyelash line a little bit. So I think that'll do for our markings at this stage. We've got the main ones in. What we'll do next is add some tonal values. So we've pretty much got dark and light at the moment. Just put a little ridge underneath the eye there. So we've got the dark grey velour, which is now very light visually. We've got the dark markings and other bits of pieces, the features and so on, which are quite dark. We want to add some mid-tones to begin with, and then some darker tones afterwards. So as long as we have three tones, dark tone, mid-tone, light tone, all greys at this point, then we have something that starts to look a little bit more realistic. We're going to start within the ear. Then the ear is facing towards us, away from the light part, so the inner part of the ear is going to be kind of mid-grey. Use the side of the hard black pastel for that. Bring it down to the base of the ear. Don't just separate these, everything is joined together, remember, so just bring it down a little bit more than you think you need. Start off light. Remember, we can always add more tone if we need to, so start off fairly light. Add a light grey or a light to mid-grey tone on the opposite ear. And then what I'm going to do is leave all the lighter, predominantly lighter bits of fur, which is usually above and below the eyes, around the cheeks and the chin. Leave those as paper for now. We can lighten them up later on. So all that gives us then is a visual feel for where all the shadows, midtones and highlights are going to be. So apart from these very light bits, above and below the eyes, maybe a little bit on the edge of the nose and the chin underneath the nose, then the rest of it's going to have this sort of light to mid-grey tone to begin with. And again, I always recommend you stroke in the direction of the fur. So don't just do horizontal strokes or vertical strokes, stroke in the direction of the fur, kind of feel your way around as though it's a 3D object. So down to the brow, just between the eyes, and around the nose. Don't forget the tip of the nose as well, that wants to be shaded. A little bit of shadow underneath the cheeks. Notice I'm trying to follow the three-dimensional curves, if you like, of the animal. Don't forget the eyes as well at this point. A lot of people tend to leave the eyes blank, too bright. They're not. They're well set back, So what that's going to give you is a nice dark grey tone for the eyes, which is much more appropriate when we start to add colour. That'll darken the colour. We don't think the eyes, because they may look bright in your photograph, don't think they are bright, because they're not. They're set back. So imagine you've got eye sockets beneath that. So the eye sockets are set well back. We have underneath the eye and a cheekbone just at the top, where we have usually lighter fur. Below that, of course, the structure starts to move away from it, because there's the raised cheekbone and the hollow underneath. So this is a great place to start thinking about all that anatomical structure. And you can capture all of that in just tonal values. As you can begin to see, we've now got a raised cheekbone there. We've got a hollow there up against the nose. We've got a hollow underneath the cheekbone. So we'll take that back. Just let that fade out where the back of the neck is. And of course, where you capture the edge of the pastel, and you're likely to capture the edge of the pastel, then as long as it's going in the right direction, that'll give you further strokes anyway. We've got a lighter chin here. We want to define the chin going up into the jawline again with a light grey shadow underneath. So following that line down into the neck and underneath the chin, and your chin and jawline will start to emerge from what's left over, the grey paper. Okay, so we have our dark markings, we have a kind of bit grey overall and light grey, which is the paper. Now we wanted to add a few little darker bits. Inside of the ear, of course, is a lot darker. That's a hollow, like a little cave, if you like. So add another layer to that. And where else? I'll probably darken the eye area a little bit more. Maybe the tip of the nose too. And the top part of the chin. Maybe that darken middle section around the cheek. Maybe just darken this area underneath the cheekbone a little bit more. The setting we're going to have for this is going to be a kind of, imagine a snowy, cold, or very cold setting in the mountains, the Himalayas and Nepal, where the snow leopards originate. So I want a nice cold feeling altogether. So I'm imagining there's going to be a cool light coming from down here somewhere, which is going to catch the side of the face, side of the nose, and the chin, and so on, and really make it stand off the background. So, as far as our initial tonal sketch goes, which is the sketch plus tone, I think we're about there. So now we can start to add some base colours. To begin with, I'm going to start with the background, because I think it's important to get the background sorted out first, so we don't have to worry about that once we've got a furry edge around the chin, the ears, and so on. Always remember, when you add some background colour, this is going to be behind your subject. Make sure you just go into the edge of the subject just a little bit, a quarter of an inch or something like that is fine. Don't try to go really precisely where you think it should stop. It wants to sit behind the subject. If you do try and go right up to the edge and stop, invariably you find you'll end up with a grey outline around it. So we don't want to do that. So we've got this nice sky blue pastel. We're going to suggest that cool, wintry sky, if you like. Maybe have it coming down at a slight angle. So it's going to be a hint of a background. I'm not going to do any mountains or anything like that, just a hint of that blue-grey sky. So I'm not going to put this on too heavily. What I want to do is let some of that grey paper show through. It gives it more of a wintry feel. It's just going to give a hint of a backdrop. So first layer goes on very light, as always, Remember, go into the edge of your subject a little bit. If I can paint a highlight over that easily, don't worry about that. Rub that in, and then always lean back, squint at it and decide whether it's enough colour for you. So I'm going to have it fading out into the edges, so I want to put a little bit more colour, probably just around the face. Just a hint of more blue there. Imagine our leopard is sat high up in the mountain, the sky's behind him, looking out for his next meal perhaps. So that should do. Now we can enhance that background a little bit more later on. We can add some darks, we can add some highlights and so on. The important thing at this stage is to make sure you've got the bulk of it sat behind your subject, which is fine. So we're going to use the blue as well in the snow leopard. I always think it's a good idea, if you can, to have colour in the background and colour in the subject, at least one of those colours in both. Gives you this kind of sense of harmony. And what we're going to do is give our snow leopard sort of blue-green eyes, not too green, not too blue. So I'm going to use a hint of this blue in the eyes to begin with. And as always, go over the edges just slightly. Don't worry about trying to shape it exactly around the pupil or around the rims or anything like that. We can tidy that up later. So there's a hint of blue. We can also put some blue in some of the deeper shadows. A little hint of blue underneath the cheekbone. Maybe a little bit around the nose and the cheeks. Just to help with that, pushing that back, because cool colours recede, warm colours come forward. Also a little bit below the brow, coming down into the nose. That helps with pushing your shadows back. And we'll have a little bit in the centre of the ear. Now this may not all be entirely visible at the end. Hints of it will be there, just helping things along. It'll be a subtle hint. So again, shadow areas and that pale fur around the neck, that's going to help us fuse that into the background, give a nice sort of fade out look to it. So even if you did that in just grey tones and blue, it would look nice, wouldn't it? Put a few highlights on. So you can make decisions as you go along. You don't have to do everything according to the reference photograph. You can just go your own way. So that's a nice sky blue in there. What we'll have next is a bit of a golden brown. Snow leopard's coats are predominantly grey, but they do have some brownish hints in here and there. So again, go light with this. We don't want to put too much brown in there, but there's a hint around the edge of the ears. Just a subtle hint, remember. You don't want to overdo the brown. And that will also give us a nice complementary warm colour to the cool blue. They're kind of opposite on the colour wheel. They go together really, really well. And again, my philosophy is if I'm doing a cool painting, which is predominantly cool colours, then I try to find a complementary warm colour to put in there somewhere. In this case it's that lovely sort of golden brown. Conversely, if I'm doing a warm painting, I like to find a complementary cool colour to put in. It stops it looking too flat. Gives it extra depth and dimension. So a little hint around the cheek and into the neck. And again we'll let that fade out into the blue. So I like to have these sort of nice faded out edges. What I don't like to see, I've done a lot of portraits over the years, pet portraits and so on, I don't like to see floating heads too much. So if you're going to do just a head, whether it be a snow leopard or a dog or a cat, try and think about just having it fading out rather than do a hard line all the way around, which gives you that kind of floating head look. A nice fade out. A little bit more on the cheek there. So we've got a hint of blue, we've got a hint of brown, and for the rest of it, we're going to put a little bit of light grey over grey areas, if you like, the grey fur. That's just going to help, it's not going to be terribly visible, but it's going to help bring those colours together. And it's going to help soften off some of those markings too. Now here I can go over where the highlights are going to be as well. So you can see it has more of an effect of softening rather than really adding colour. Once you've done your blocking in of your base colours, which is what this is of course, blocking in your base colours, once you've done that you'll notice that your tones are now kind of fairly diffused. Don't worry about that, because at this stage now when we come on to the detail we can start bringing things together. I'm going to come back to the eyes in a bit because I did say we're going to put some green in there, but we'll do that when we do the eyes proper. So the next stage is adding more detail. We've got the basics there, we've got the underlying markings and the pieces and so on. What we need to do is think about those elements we want to really bring out. So do we want, for example, the markings, the detail down in this bit to be the same as this bit? I would argue no, because that will help us to fade that out, and bits that are faded out will recede. The bits that have more detail and sharper tone, stronger tone, sharper detail will come forward. So this is probably the area we're most interested in. This is where we're going to concentrate all the finer details and stronger tones. Ears, eyes, nose, mouth essentially. So using a slightly sharper corner on my black pastel, not too sharp, but slightly sharper. Go back to where I started, and let's get that nice, slightly crisper edge around the ear. And we can begin to refine shapes a little bit at this stage as well if they've been a little bit sketchy up till now. Already you can see that stronger tone, sharper edge is bringing the ear forward. Again, don't forget to give it a rub all the way through. Rub the pastel in, every layer you put on, whether it be a hard pastel or a soft pastel, just keep rubbing it in bit by bit. Make sure it sticks. It'll give you a nice firm bed for subsequent layers. And then we'll do the centre of the ear again. Again, I'm only interested in the basic shape of the centre of the ear. That will be refined by hairs coming across that later on. Make sure you have a nice, large shadow area in the centre of the ear. Okay, and then we'll do the other area while we're there, just the tip of the ear in this case. And then refine the markings. So you usually find, depending on how many layers you're doing, you can do as many layers as you want on this of course, 30, 40, 50 layers if you want. And you usually find that bit by bit, if you do layers, many layers, you'll find that your fur texture gets more, I suppose, realistic. You get more fur bit by bit. But you don't have to. You can do an equally effective painting just with one or two layers. So if you're planning on just doing one or two layers, then at this stage, try to make them fairly sharp. Those markings and the texture fairly sharp. You don't have to. The great thing about this kind of painting is you've got so many choices. You don't have to make it finely detailed. You can keep it fairly soft, fairly lacking in sharp detail if you want to, and then concentrate on the highlights. The final highlights are always going to be the sharpest. The final highlights are what brings everything together. So if you don't want to do lots and lots of fur texture, lots and lots of fur detail, don't bother. Just do a little bit of soft fur texture like this, fairly loose, and then let your highlights finish the job. Still give it a good firm stroke every now and again, soften the marks. Around the eyes. Now you will have chance at the end to sharpen up again, or strengthen tone and detail again on important areas. So don't over worry about around the eyes, nose and mouth yet. Think about that at the final stage. But what I want to do at this stage is just make them a little bit sharper, a little bit stronger in those areas that we consider to be important. What this does, it helps you direct the viewer where you want them to look. So you don't necessarily want the viewer, if this is mounted in a frame or whatever, you don't necessarily want your viewer to concentrate on this bit, you want them to concentrate on this bit, I reckon. So this is the start of that process. Again, the all important whisker follicles. Always make sure you've got the right number of rows, usually between 6 and 8 follicles from front to back. If you've got cats at home, maybe you haven't got a snow leopard, but maybe you've got smaller cats, you can check, because they're all the same. 4 rows of follicles. If they'll let you hold them long enough to count, that is. If they're anything like mine, you'll find you might come away with a few nicks and scratches or whatever, so do be careful. So that's that nice dark piece of fur there, again a few little spots on the chin. Let's not forget the curve of the bottom lip. Okay, and into the whisker follicles on the other side. Again with the nose, nostril line at the top is the sharpest bit. A little ridge of dark fur just above the top of the heart shape. Very distinct shape. The cat's nose is this heart shape. The trick is when you come to do it on an angle, getting the angle right. And with a bit of practice you can do that easily, but even without a reference photograph. You can do that fairly easily. So the final few markings around here. Now when it comes to the final stage, we do the highlights and final tonal adjustments. A lot of these will not get touched again. We'll just narrow it down bit by bit to the focal point where we want, which is eyes, nose and mouth, I guess. And these bits fading out around the edges, here and there, just give them a little soft touch, but nothing more than that. Let them fade out. Okay, so a little bit more tone at this stage. Predominantly the centre of the ear again, and cheekbone where we've lost a little bit of tone because we put colour over the top. And this prominent forehead. Now, snow leopards, let's begin with that. Snow leopards do have quite rounded foreheads, quite big foreheads compared to, say, a cheetah, which tend to have very flat foreheads. The reason for that is because they live in a cold climate, and there's a sinus cavity here, which, when the air is sucked in through the nose, it warms it up before it goes down into the lungs. Cheetahs don't need that big rounded head shape because they live in a warmer climate, so the sinus cavity here is a lot smaller. Which means that you can always tell a snow leopard's, if you've got the snow leopard's forehead right, because it's got quite a heavy brow, rounded and then goes in between the eyes. So that little bit of extra tone between the eyes is going to help promote that rounded forehead. Okay, one of these important things that people are looking at it and they know anything about big cats, they can spot that. So just by putting that deeper shadow between the eyes, brings that rounded forehead out towards you, even at this stage. Okay? So a little bit more shading in these areas that are away from us. Cheekbone. Predominantly the cheekbone, corners of the eyes. And a little bit more on the inside of the ear. And away from that, just to push it back. And maybe a little bit more shadow underneath the chin as well. So you see the great value of tones as well. Don't underestimate the importance of tone in the painting, because it keeps bringing out those three-dimensional forms. And it's constantly changing as well. Don't think that once you've set the tones initially, that's it. It's a constantly changing thing, so keep looking at it, keep sitting back, squinting at it. That's way to check your tones. Okay, so what we'll do next is we'll deal with the eyes, and then we can do our final stage. So the eyes. Now I did say they're going to be kind of blue-grey, sort of blue-green, I beg your pardon. So we've got the sky blue from the sky in the eyes at this point. We're going to add a touch of the soft green on top of that. Again, not too heavy, otherwise we'll get rid of all the blue. So just gently, gently go over the blue with a little bit of the soft green until you've got that sort of blue-green look. If you go too green, of course, this eye is too green, we can always add a touch more blue. And you can do that many, many times. That should do it, I think. So, next thing is to get more definition in the eyes, shadows, highlights, and so on. So, the first thing I'm going to do is reset the pupil. I always dab the shape of the pupil on with the end of the black pastel, by the way. Don't draw it as a hard round circle. It's not a cartoon. The pupils are surrounded by muscles which allow the pupils to open and close, so they're a little bit fuzzy around the edge. And we've got the lower rim here. And we'll do the same on this one, then we'll work out shadows, highlights and reflections. So again, dab on the shape and just redefine the eyelash line going down to the corner, the edge of the iris there coming down into the tear duct, and the lower rim, remember the edge of the eyeball and the lower rim. So that's our basic shape. Just keep checking, just keep squinting as well, checking the tones if it wants to be a little bit darker, make it darker bit by bit. So we've got our basic shapes in. Now let's think about shadows, highlights and reflections. Okay, those are the key things that will make your eyes realistic. So first of all, shadows. Now if our light's coming from the left hand side, and what we're going to do, what the light's going to do is going to highlight as it goes through the roundness of the eye. It's going to highlight the opposite side and cast a shadow from whatever gets in its way. If the light's from above, that usually the eyebrow there and the eyelid will cast a shadow underneath. If it's coming from that side, you've got this big rounded forehead there that's also going to cast a shadow just here where the light can't penetrate. So on here, for example, we're going to get most of the shadow in this top left hand corner. Just use the end of the pastel just to softly get a darker shadow in there. It's kind of a glaze, so we don't want to get rid of the colour, we just want to glaze over it until it's a slightly darker colour. There'll be a little bit of a shadow underneath the eyelid, in this case, a tiny bit. If it's midday, the sun's coming directly from above, that shadow might come all the way down to here, maybe 2/3, but it's not, so it's only going to get a little bit underneath the eyelid, mostly in that corner there. And this side is going to be mostly under the eyelid and the right hand side, which you can't see. Okay, so that's a shadow. Second thing is the highlights. Now where the light passes through the rounded clear part of the eye, the cornea, it will highlight the iris on the opposite side. So it'll lighten up that bit. Don't get highlights confused with reflections, by the way. So it's just a little bit of a softer or paler blue-green. And the same one here, around about the bottom of the eye. That's shadows and highlights. The third thing, we've got the white of the eye showing there, the sclera as well. We'll put that little bit in. The third thing is going to be the reflection. So where the sun hits the eyeball, the outer layer, the cornea, is going to bounce off and cause a reflection. So it will be whichever side of the pupil it hits. So in this case, left hand side of the pupil, just below your shadow or on the edge of the shadow. Dab it on with the end of your white pastel, create that reflection, and just about here as well. Softer reflection here because we're in shadow a little bit. Maybe a touch of hint of the sky over there as well. Okay, lean back and squint. Make sure you can see those reflections. You can always enhance them a bit more if you want to. And any tidying up that needs to be done, do that afterwards. So a rounded part of the eyeball, the pupils perhaps, things like that. Tidy it up once you've done all those bits. Okay, so now we come to the final stage, which is adding our final tonal contrast. So the darkest tones and the lightest tones, including the highlights in this case. So before we do that on the leopard, let's think about the background. We can do all sorts of things with the background. We can add some white cloud in there if you want to, or maybe in this case we're going to have a hint of snow in the background. Always best to use a hard white pastel for things like soft snow, by the way. If you use a soft white pastel, it's going to kind of explode on the painting. We don't want that, we don't keep control. So as long as you've got a rounded part of a hard white pastel, you're going to get some nice soft snowflakes. So again, just a little hint here and there, just give it a more of a wintry feel. See how soft those marks are. That's a hard pastel, just with a rounded end. The key to this, of course, is trying to make them look random. As always, the brain wants to make everything uniform, so trying to randomise it goes against what the brain is trying to do for us. Some big, some small, some in the background. And again, just a little rub just to make sure they're not too obvious. So what we're going to do first of all is what I call secondary highlights. And secondary highlights are going to be the soft highlights in the fur, not the primary highlights, which are going to be the edge, but the furry highlights. Again, using the rounded part of the white pastel. We'll begin around the eyes. So in between some of these marks, like the snowflakes, you want to keep this fairly soft. Thinking about the length and direction of the fur, I want some soft, almost very pale grey highlighted fur. This is, if you apply it softly with a rounded part of the pastel, you're going to get a pale version of what's underneath. For example, if we painted this over the blue, we'll get pale blue. If we painted it over the brown, we'll get pale brown. That's by not pressing on. So pale grey fur to begin with. Remember, think about the length and the direction. You can get all these clues from the original reference, of course. And what this does around here, as you can see, is it helps to make that rounded forehead even rounder. So I'll put a few little hints, mostly in the head, the back of the ear hairs there. And again, you don't have to be very, very detailed and very sharp with this fur texture, as you can see. Even by keeping it fairly soft, it still gives you enough of a suggestion of fur. Make sure that hard pastel is rounded. A little bit of soft pale fur on the inside of the ear, and to the base of the ear, and then where it joins the head. Again, just a few flicks to show the fur that joins the head to the ear. And we do some hairs, which always go from the outside in. Slightly sharper corner perhaps for this one. From the outside in over that shadow. When it comes to individual hairs, such as these, always try to rub away the roots so you don't see the roots. This will be equally important when we come to the whiskers, which will show that at the end anyway. So a little soft edge to the neck along the right hand side where it fades out into the background. And then we'll continue around the eyes, nose and mouth. Again, letting it fade out around the edges so we don't have too many highlights around the edges. So maybe when we've got the edge of the cheek. I'm going to do that a lot softer. You can see it's already a lot softer than the individual hairs I did around the eyes. So this is the focal point, of course, remember. So, soft highlight on around the eye there, edge of the nose, beneath the lower rim. And again on here, look for all those soft highlights. You're going to get paler fur around the eyes naturally, that's going to help. So pale fur there, pale fur underneath. A lot of big cats, especially those with markings, have pale fur. Even lions do actually. Pale fur below the eye, white or cream, something like that, which helps deflect the sun. Again, lean back and squint. It should be just enough to lift it. We've had a few light bits of fur amongst those dark markings if you want to. Go around the nose. Again, usually pale fur around there too. And around the cheek. Remember, keep it nice and soft. Unless you want it to be hard, fine detail, which you can do. There's no rule one way or the other. Sometimes, if it's just more of a complete sketch like this, I think softness is good. That's what velour is there for. It helps to give you that softness. Use it. Okay, so I'll have a jawline now, which has virtually disappeared. Now we can bring that back. Nice and soft. A few little soft pale hairs in the neck. Slightly longer. Again, letting it fade out into that bottom right hand corner. So, chin. Let's begin to define the chin, which hasn't been defined so far, with our secondary highlight. We're not doing fine whiskers or anything at this point. Remember, these are just secondary highlights, helping us find those shapes, those underlying shapes before we put the final highlights on. I'll have a few little flecks, pale flecks underneath the cheek. That's all going to help push that cheek back. Bridge of the nose, again, use that. It's kind of fairly flat now, the end of that pastel, so use that just to get the highlight on the bridge of the nose. So we have like two sinus bones running down there. There's going to be a sort of shadow in the middle, highlight on either side. So those all help to give you the shape of the nose. Softly to begin with, remember, final definition comes at the end. So don't think about the final definition just yet. Even the final shaping of the nose can be done right at the end. So you've got plenty of room for corrections if you need to. Okay, so before we put the primary highlight on, just consider the darker tones. So what we want to do, as I said, is maybe bring out this section a little bit sharper, bring it a little bit closer to us. The eyes, of course, I think are the most important. To me, they look fairly okay as they are now, fairly sharp. But what I will do is just bring this ear forward. I'll leave that ear where it is. that's obviously going back quite a bit. Bring this here forward just a touch more, using the black in this case. A little bit more shadow, a little bit more definition there. And that stronger tone, whether it's black or white, it's a stronger tone, brings it forward. That ear now is a lot more forward than the one on the other side. And you get around the eyes. Now, the eyes, the black in the eyes, the definition in the eyes is sharper than the fur around it. So I like to use this opportunity just to define a little bit more some of the markings around the eyes. Tiny bit sharper, certainly darker. And that is going to bring the whole eye area forward. That's why I call this stage contrast, because contrast is really the tool that you use to direct the viewer where you want them to look. You want them to concentrate on the face more than anything, so this is what's going to help you do that. You contrast final sharps, final darks and lights, what you want people to see, or what you want people to see first. So anything just immediately above and below the eyes will have more contrast and sharper detail. And again, let these fade out bit by bit. So eyes, nose, mouth. Just redefine those whisker follicles a slightly more nostril shape. This is something you can do again over several layers. The more layers you do, the more fur texture you get, the more tones you'll get, and so on. So now we come to our final highlights, the primary highlights, and this is going to give us the outline, going to give us a much more atmospheric, even dramatic finish to the whole painting. So this is where it all happens, I guess. So let's start with the ear. And I've got to remember where our light's coming from. Our light's actually coming from top left here somewhere. It can be wherever you want, of course, but in this case we're going to have it coming from top left. I'm just going to highlight all of this side around here and really bring it off the background. So the left-hand part of the ear first, and don't forget, even if you have a fairly normal humdrum photograph, you can actually create something much more dramatic and atmospheric by adding your own highlights. You don't have to stick with what you've got on the photograph, as long as you know what you're going to highlight. Now, of course, what we could do, one of the options is, a nice option actually, is to have a backlighting where the light is slightly behind, so you're just going to catch a kind of halo effect all the way around. But not in this case. We'll have our original left-hand lighting. So do the light hairs on the back of that ear, and just remember, you can draw a little arrow on the board if you want to, but just remember the direction of the light. Is it in front of your subject, behind the subject, alongside the subject, and so on. So the first thing, as always, is to use this opportunity to get the outline finally drawn. We haven't really drawn the outline as such, remember, so this is the chance to do it. The second thing to remember is that rather than just doing an outline, which is kind of highlighting a three-dimensional object, unless you're backlighting, if you imagine the snooker ball, white snooker ball on a table, the light's catching it, some of that light is going to spill over because it's a three-dimensional object. If it was a disc, then you just get a line around it. This is, of course, a three-dimensional object, so we are going to have some light, not just on the edge, but inside as well. So imagine, for example, some of that light, we're going to catch the pale fur around the eyes as well. Even if it's only a quarter of an inch, half an inch, something like that, it'll show a rounded object. So I'm using a slightly rounded corner of the white pastel, not too sharp. I want to keep that softness. You can see already we've got a rounded form on the top of the head. So the lower rim and cheek on the left hand side. and then the nose. So now's the time when you can fix the nose. You can completely redraw the nose almost. We're going to let the outer line first, going down towards the tip of the nose. And then remember, that's not a two-dimensional nose, it's three-dimensional, so I want a little bit of light spinning over. Again, even if it's just a quarter of an inch, half an inch, something like that, it'll show us a rounded three-dimensional form. I'll show those lumps and bumps. So always start with the defined edge and then bring your highlight back from that. So it's seamless. Okay, so we've got beginnings of a three-dimensional nose. Again, just keep sitting back, squinting at it, making sure your highlight is as strong as you want it to be. You can always add more. And we'll bring it around the tip of the nose and the left-hand cheek. Bring it in a little bit, remember. Show the rounded form. And the chin. Mostly catching the edge of the chin. Fade that back into the jawline. Maybe there's going to be a little hint along the neck. Just a little bit of soft fur. Catching the light there. And we may also get a little bit spinning over onto this eye as well, depending how far around our light source is. Either way, that's going to enhance that eye too. Okay, so the final bit will be the whiskers. Sharper corner of the pastel for that. Whiskers on the far side, they catch more light. Chin whiskers too. When you do whiskers, like the hairs inside the ear, always try to bury the roots. Shorter and finer whiskers at the front, longer and thicker towards the back. And there are some black whiskers too, so we'll put those in. And again, remember, once we've done those, we'll bury the roots. First of all, by rubbing, if necessary, go over the white ones a little bit around the base with the black. Sharpen that nostril a tiny bit too. So there we are. So Snow Leopard in a few basic coloured pastels, warm and cool pastels on grey paper with a nice atmospheric wintry background. Hope you've enjoyed this. Don't forget, if you want the kit details, the home workshop kit details are coming up on the screen. If you do have a go at this, the home workshop kit, please post your results on my Facebook page, which is also coming up on the screen, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel for more tutorials like this. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.